Hey guys, FTG here. Today I want to talk about the Assault class, and less so a rant, more of a discussion about the balance of this class in relation to things like Vanguard and Bulwark. So a lot of people still feel like the Assault class is very underpowered in this game. It's been like an issue in the game really since launch, where Assault really was dramatically underpowered. Now, personally, I don't feel like the Assault class is in a bad spot. I do feel, however, he is harder to play for like no reason in comparison to other melee classes, and a lot of players might think like, oh wait, what are we talking about? This class is super powerful. This guy just needs to get good. I don't think that's a good response to players who are struggling with the Assault class, because if we look at the other melee classes in the game, if we look at Vanguard and Bulwark, these classes are objectively easier to play in terms of margin for error, where like the margin for error for a Bulwark class in Invigorating Icon is just higher. He has more damage reduction, he can heal your entire team. A perk like Invigorating Icon is incredibly powerful in this game because it breaks the pickup economy of the game. What you're basically doing with this perk is printing HP for your entire team. You are giving them potentially tens, if not hundreds of times more stims throughout your game and like a really long match. So that is a really powerful perk, and it's really hard to generate anything of equivalent value on any other perk in the game compared to this one. Unmatched Zeal is the same thing. Like, these are global heals for your whole team. These don't just up the margin for error for you as an individual in these melee classes, they up the margin for error for your entire group, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because I don't feel like having a greater margin for error takes away from the gameplay experience of a better player. And like, what I mean by that is, when we look at the historical nerf in Space Marine 2 of the grenade launcher, this isn't a perk, but like, this weapon was OP. Emperor's Vengeance would give you back 10 grenades on every single trigger from a grenade launcher, and because of that, your tactical was able to walk through the entire map and body every single Tyrannid or every single Chaos Spawn, or I mean, there were Chaos Spawn back then, but every single Chaos enemy that he possibly could, and just basically turn the entire game into a walking simulator for his teammates. That's why they nerfed this thing. That's why it was unfun to play with, because it was actively taking away from other people's experiences, or at least some people's experiences, because some people didn't care about this at all. They were like, oh, but like, it's just a strong weapon, it's a PvE game, we shouldn't be nerfing anything. I don't really agree with that. I think that having a nerf in a PvE game, or like a balance in a PvE game, is important, because otherwise every single experience will just be one person clearing the whole map if everything is like ridiculously overpowered. But the thing that's good to have for like crutch perks, as some people would put them, like Invigorating Icon, makes the game easier, but it doesn't make the game less fun for other players, because it's not taking away from their experience. They're still fighting the same enemies, they're still doing the same damage, they're still having the same gameplay experience, they just don't die as often. So like, if you don't want to play with this, you don't have to. Arguably, Concussive Force is a better perk anyways on the Bulwark, because the Shield Bash does so much damage. But if you are not a super good player and you just want to play something else like Invigorating Icon, you can definitely do that. And that's a healthy game design. I think that's good for all players in the game, because like, I feel like a lot of the issues in these games is that they feel like, oh, well, this person went through with Invigorating Icon, so like my gameplay experience is taken away from. I don't think that's a good way to look at it. I think these perks are totally fine to have in a game. My issue with the Assault class is that he doesn't really have crutch perks. Like, this class doesn't have an ease of use option, so like, players will naturally gravitate away from Assault if they are struggling in this game, because classes like Bulwark and Vanguard are easier to play, even if they want to play the Assault class. So, and he is the only class in the game that has no healing perks whatsoever that is like a melee oriented class. And the reason people compare the Bulwark and Assault so often is because Bulwark is the only other class in Space Marine 2 that has a no primary option. That's why they're so similar to each other. This guy has way more Nova damage than the Bulwark does, and Nova damage, if you're unaware, is just burst damage in a video game. And burst damage is very powerful in Space Marine 2. Zealous Blow does scale up tremendously in modes like Siege Mode. This class is strong, but to like play him at that level is simply a far more difficult task for most players. And most players, they're just trying to have fun. This is not a PvP game. This is not League of Legends, where like your Yasuo is just way out of the skill cap of 99% of your player base, and that's okay because it's a competitive game. This is a PvE game where like every class should be equally accessible in my mind, and like having a blatant discrepancy between like skill caps for classes like this, where a player will just, who is struggling on Assault, will just move over to Bulwark and Vanguard instead because they're easier to play. I don't think that's healthy for a PvE game. I think it's good to have skill-capped builds in the game where, like, okay, you want to play Wings of Flame with, like, commitment. This is harder to play than Zealous Blow is, so a player that wants to do that can definitely do that. But if there's no crutch option for these players, for both factions, which is, like, that's the real option here, is that Assault does not perform as well versus Chaos compared to, like, every other class in Space Marine 2. I mean, he can. Let's be clear. He definitely can, but Perks like Armor Reinforcement are very strong versus Tyranids because they feed you gun strikes. But when you go and give a player that's not as good at the game this perk and send them into Chaos Spawn, they're just going to get shit on. And like that's the real thing. And like you have to give up your survivability on this class to take damage perks like Overcharge. In the case of Bulwark gets everything. He gets his cake and he eats it too. Because when you have Overcharge in this class, it's in your Prestige perk tree. So you're giving up like literally nothing for this. You get your full damage reduction with Conviction plus Steel Within, plus your advanced conditioning for a slower CHP fade, which the Assault has to give up his equipment recharge or secondary damage for, on top of giving up his armor reinforcement for to take Overcharge, and a Bulwark can take armor reinforcement, or Steel Within, or Conviction, or Intimidating Aura and Steel Within. So he's getting damage reduction, plus damage, plus an easier CHP fade, plus healing himself, plus no knockback on Armor Advance, and then also gets the Overcharge perk to buff his damage up on Block Fist, all while also having 100% range damage reduction while blocking with the shield, all while also having a guaranteed stagger on enraged enemies, also having a guaranteed animation cancel to make his gameplay style more fluid, because unfortunately for Assault, Saber Interactive, I don't think most Assault players even disagree with this, that Saber Interactive has just not properly handled his jump pack dash. The fact that the jump pack dash, a fundamental portion of this class, does not really function as a proper ability at all without the commitment perk, I think it's a fundamental game flaw, where like you should have this built as a passive into the game. If you are taking commitment, or if you're not taking a commitment, I should say, your jump pack dash is like a direct detriment to your damage, because not getting your jump pack dash back, or like losing a jump pack ability charge off of your jump pack dash and not getting any option to have it be returned to you, you're just losing your Nova damage. And Nova damage is like the only thing this class is like godly at, on top of its horde clear with that Nova damage. So when you take that away from him, this perk becomes useless, or I should say the jump pack dash ability becomes useless, and that's why commitment is such a mandatory perk for every Wings of Flame build. Just think, how many more jump pack dashes are you getting off a perk like this versus taking amp ammunition with Wings of Flame? You're getting like basically jack shit is the point. So that's kind of an unfortunate thing there. And giving up your damage for, or excuse me, giving up your survivability for damage here when other classes simply don't have to, that feels pretty bad for players as well. And I feel like at some point, Saber does have to recognize where their player base is at. That Saber Interactive needs to know that Space Marine 2 is a casual community. It is primarily 40k fans. It has a lot of older fans. This is not Darktide that is like trying to have a Havoc 40 mode that is just way out of the skill level of 99% of players. It is good to have higher difficulties for players that do want that, and hard stratagems and solo hard stratagems can definitely be that. When you're trying to have your game be accessible and also have a skill cap, having one class just have 0 crush options, I just don't feel like is the way to do it. And the fact that so many players still feel Assault is underpowered, I think that should be telling to you about where the general skill cap of your player base is. It's not to say that we should make the Assault OP, and that's the biggest thing I want to talk about here, is that to make the Assault equivalent to Bulwark would take a lot more than giving him a healing perk or a damage reduction perk. To make Assault as equivalent to Bulwark, you have to give him like an animation cancel, a perfect CDR, a class ability that generates as much value as Invigorating Icon, and like these things are just not going to happen in Space Marine 2. I don't know why Saber is so afraid to give this class like a proper crutch perk. One of the best buffs they ever actually did to this class was give him a perk from Bulwark, where they just stole his team perk and gave it to him in his core tree. And this is one of the best columns in the entire game, where like Consecutive Execution, Defense Mechanism, and Auxiliary Arsenal. These are all amazing perks, and like this is a real choice here. And giving players the option to have a survivability perk over damage, that is good, but other classes don't have to do that. Bulwark doesn't have to do that. To buff up Assault to level of Bulwark would require like a fundamental rework of like 90% of his abilities, like a full perk tree rework. And when you're looking at what players want in Space Marine 2, where you're looking at what most players play, most players currently are playing operations and hard stratagems. Most players look at their team perks when they're floating into a game being like, oh man, I'm glad my teammate brought Inner Fire. I'm glad my teammate brought Unmasked Zeal. I'm glad my teammate brought Advanced Conditioning or Focus Restoration or Invigorating Icon. There's nothing really like that for the Assault class. Like when a normal player goes into a game and they see their Assault load in, they're like, okay, my Assault brought in proven efficiency. Oh yeah, guys, my gun strikes are going through the moon now. Oh, we have strategic strikes. My melee damage is going through the moon. A perk like this does literally nothing for certain builds in this game. Like, say your teammate, like your tactical, is bringing a fencing weapon into the game. Okay, well, this melee damage buff does like nothing for him. It's only really useful for the assault class. It's a pretty selfish perk tree, for being honest. Like, proven efficiency, this is a good perk, but guess what? Classes that are, this is one of the best perks, because having this does affect the gunstrike damage of every single class in the game. That's something that they all utilize, but not every single class utilizes melee damage. Strategic strikes does nothing for heavy. Tactical's aligned aim does do something for the assault class, because assault still is a ranged weapon. So I just feel like his team perks could use a bit of a rework. That's what a lot of people want. And honestly, just like flat damage buff team perks are pretty boring in general, but I doubt Saber's ever going to change that. The bigger issue I have is that the impact of a team perk like Advanced Conditioning or Focus Restoration, or let alone Inner Fire and Unmasked Zeal, which are like unbelievably godlike in this game, is just so much higher for the majority of players that they're going to see an assault and be like, man, I wish that was a Vanguard. I wish that was a Bulwark. And that's just a bad place for a class to be. And it really does feel like Saber Interactive is afraid to make this class stronger because they don't want it to be too strong, but they don't understand that Bulwark is already so damn strong that what it would take to actually bring Assault up to that level for like general players is ridiculous. So I really don't think it'd be an issue, because if you give him a healing perk, he's just going to have a higher margin for error. He's not going to suddenly have more damage. He's not going to start bombing bosses in 2 seconds. He's not going to suddenly start just like removing every single enemy on the map. I don't think it would take away from the player base if you were to give him a signature perk option or like a core perk option to heal himself, because I feel like players would probably enjoy that, and players that don't want to have that could just not take it. And I don't really think most people disagree with that, because like it's not going to suddenly up his clear rates on things like siege mode. It's not going to suddenly up his clear rates on hard stratagems in terms of like how fast he's doing these missions and things like that. It's just going to make his margin for error for like the lower skill players that are already struggling with him and don't even want to touch him a bit easier. So I think that'd be pretty good for the game. And I feel like Saber should just understand that like sometimes their balance ideas are bad and their perk designs are bad, and they should just take a look at them and fix them. But the fact they haven't done that for a lot of perks in this game already is kind of a red flag. They probably never will. But either way, let me know what you guys think about the Assault class in the comments below. Do you think he should have some more crutch perks? Because I think that is the big issue, is that this class versus Chaos especially does struggle more for the majority of players. I'll make very clear, for the majority of players, he does struggle more, especially the majority of his builds, because Chaos Spawn are very hard for most players. Enlightened Zangors are absolutely brutal if you take the wrong weapon. Like, precision weapons suck ass versus Enlightened Zangors. The Neo Volkai pistol is probably like one of the worst secondaries in the entire game to take on this class, because the CHP regen of this weapon is god awful. And if you do take this weapon, you are nerfing your own contested health recovery so damn much that most players are gonna die. Let's put it that way. Most players are just going to die if they take a Neo Volkai pistol to Chaos, or if they take a Neo Volkai pistol to Tyranids, and they're new to the Assault class. You will just fucking die with this weapon. So what happens is 99% of players, they just get funneled into Plasma, Heavy Bolt Pistol, and Inferno Pistol maybe, or maybe not the Bolt Pistol, but like this one's just completely neglected. So like, hopefully they take a look at that, because the reason other classes like Vanguard can take all these secondary options, or Bulwark can, is because they have so many ridiculous options to survive outside of those, and this class is so very dependent on the CHP recovery of his secondaries versus, and that's just like a little bit of a problem with him, because his damage reduction is awful. And when you have low damage reduction in this game, your margin for error goes down so much, and when you have a low margin for error, a weapon that gives you back a low CHP recovery is going to make it that much worse. You just get funneled into different options. That's my bigger problem with this class. That's just how I feel in general, and hopefully you agree. And if you disagree, let me know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching. Take it easy. Bye.